You felt it before you had words for it. It arrived quietly, the way a cold draft slips under a door before you even realize the window was left open somewhere deep in the house of your spirit. He walked into the room, and something in your chest rearranged itself. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the kind of subtle alarm that the body sends when it recognizes a threat the mind is not yet ready to name. You stood there smiling. You kept your voice steady. You told yourself it was nothing, that you were reading too far into a moment that carried no particular weight, but the feeling stayed. It wrapped itself around the base of your throat and made a home there, patient and persistent, waiting for the day you would finally stop dismissing it and start listening to what it was actually saying to you. That unease did not come from you. It was not the residue of old wounds coloring a new situation. It was not anxiety manufacturing a threat where none existed. The body is not always a reliable narrator, but the spirit is. And what you were sensing in those charged, quiet moments was not your own fear speaking. It was something far older and far more accurate than fear. It was the voice of the one who knit you together before time had a name, pressing into the tender fabric of your awareness, asking you to pay attention to what the surface of things was being carefully arranged to hide. Heaven does not shout when it warns you. It whispers with a consistency that eventually becomes impossible to ignore. You were chosen before you understood what that meant, long before you could articulate the light that moves through you, before you had language for your calling or vocabulary for the particular way God fashioned your spirit. Heaven had already written your name into a purpose that would require protection. Not the protection of walls and distance and permanent suspicion, but the protection that comes from discernment, from that sacred ability to see beneath the surface of a smile and understand what is truly moving in the waters underneath. Being chosen is beautiful. It is also a kind of exposure. Not everyone who is drawn to your warmth is drawn by love. Some are drawn because they are cold, and your fire is the closest heat they have ever been near. Some are drawn because your faith is alive, and theirs has grown silent and resentful and hungry for something it no longer knows how to build on its own. That is why in the trilogy The Three Keys to a Prosperous Life, the link is in the pinned comment, I explain how a chosen soul must first learn the language of its own inner compass before it can ever safely navigate the complexity of other people. This man was not sent to help you grow. He was sent, or arrived rather, by the slow gravity of his own unhealed interior to test whether you had yet learned to guard what God placed inside you. And the warning you received was not punishment. It was one of the most precise forms of grace you will ever be offered. Think about what he said in the early days, when everything felt possible, and the shape of him seemed to fit so naturally into the empty spaces of your longing. He spoke of your dreams as though he carried them too. He reflected your language back to you with an accuracy that felt like recognition, like finally being seen by someone whose vision was clear enough to hold the full picture of who you were. And that feeling of being seen, truly seen, is one of the most intoxicating experiences available to a human heart, especially a heart that has spent years carrying a depth that others found inconvenient or exhausting, or simply too much. He found the exact door of your longing and knocked on it at exactly the right hour. The problem was never that the door existed. The problem was what was standing on the other side of it. Because what you did not yet know in those early weeks, what heaven already knew with complete and unhurried certainty, was that his attention was not rooted in genuine admiration. It was rooted in appetite. There is a critical difference between a person who sees your light and celebrates it freely, and a person who sees your light and slowly begins to calculate how much of it they can absorb before you notice the dimming. The first kind of love expands you. The second kind, over time, begins to contract you. Not through dramatic scenes or obvious cruelty, but through small surgical moments of minimization. through the offhand comment that arrived just as your confidence was climbing, through the sudden withdrawal of warmth precisely when you needed steadiness, through the smile that never quite reached the eyes when others praised something you had created or achieved. Your body registered every one of those moments, even when your mind was still assembling justifications for them. The stomach knows, the chest knows, the small hollow place behind the sternum knows when the air around a person has changed from safe to something you cannot fully name but cannot fully dismiss. This is not weakness. This is the biological architecture of a human being that was designed to survive, and it speaks in the language of sensation before it ever reaches the vocabulary of thought. The tightness you carried after certain conversations with him was not paranoia. It was data. It was your nervous system sending a clear and consistent signal that something in the environment required your full attention. The social dimension of this was perhaps the cruelest layer, because it unfolded not in private, but in the presence of others who could not see what you were navigating. At tables surrounded by people, during the kinds of celebrations that are supposed to feel like belonging, you wore the expression of someone who was present while your interior was conducting an entirely different conversation with itself. You watched him perform warmth for the room, while you alone carried the private knowledge of what his warmth felt like when the audience was gone. You smiled with a mouth that was working very hard to protect a truth your heart was still in the process of accepting. That labor, the invisible labor of managing the distance between what you knew and what the world was observing, is an exhaustion that leaves a specific kind of mark on the soul. And God saw you in every one of those moments, not from a distance, not with the detached gaze of someone observing from behind glass, but with the close and aching attention of a parent watching a child carry a weight that was never supposed to be theirs. He saw the swallowed tears. He saw the recalibration you performed on yourself in quiet rooms, the private negotiations where you convinced yourself to stay, to try harder, to extend more grace, to interpret his behavior through the most generous possible lens. He honored your tenderness in those moments, even as he grieved that you were spending it on a connection that was drawing from you without ever truly replenishing what it took. Heaven does not stay silent when something threatens a life that has been set apart for a specific and irreplaceable purpose. The stirring you felt, that persistent, inconvenient, impossible to silence stirring, was divine intervention arriving in the most personal form it can take, a feeling woven directly into the fabric of your lived experience. Not a sign in the sky, not a voice from outside, a pressure from inside, patient and unmistakable, asking you to trust what you already knew before you allowed hope to rearrange the evidence. There is a story in the ancient texts that maps exactly what you have been living. Joseph was his father's beloved. He carried a dream large enough to reshape entire kingdoms, and the people closest to him, the ones who shared his blood, his table, his history, looked at that dream and felt the cold fire of envy ignite in their chests. They could not celebrate what they sensed was destined to surpass them, and so they stripped him of the coat that represented his belovedness and threw him into a pit, and then sat down to eat as though they had simply completed a task. What looked like destruction was actually the beginning of a repositioning so profound it would take years to fully reveal itself. The pit was not the end. The pit was the departure gate for a destination none of his brothers had the architecture to imagine. If you are in a season where distance is forming between you and this man, if the space is widening and you find that peace is quietly returning to the rooms of your interior that had gone silent, do not interpret that distance as failure. Do not dress it in the heavy garments of loss and carry it as though it represents something that went wrong. The space itself is grace. The space is God clearing the floor of a room he intends to fill with something that actually belongs there. Not every departure is abandonment. Some departures are precise and loving surgical removals that only the hand of the divine can perform with the accuracy the situation requires. The enemy does not send obvious enemies. This is the truth that the world consistently fails to prepare you for, and it is one of the most costly gaps in what most people are taught about spiritual warfare. Obvious enemies are easy. You see them coming from a distance, and you adjust your position accordingly. What the enemy actually sends is something far more disarming. He sends the familiar face, the charming voice, the person who somehow knows the exact vocabulary of your deepest longing and speaks it back to you with a fluency that feels like recognition. He sends the person who positions themselves as a safe harbor precisely because they have studied which specific storms of your past have left you most desperate for shelter. A harbor that hides rocks beneath its surface is not a harbor. It is a trap, constructed in the architectural language of relief. This is why discernment is not optional for the chosen life. It is not a spiritual luxury reserved for the particularly paranoid or the deeply wounded. It is a survival instrument, a divine faculty that, when properly developed, allows you to measure the distance between what a person says and what their consistent behavior actually produces over time. Discernment watches the pattern, while charm watches the performance. Discernment asks what fruit this tree has actually borne across seasons, while infatuation is satisfied with the beauty of the blossoms. There is a point in every chosen person's journey where they must graduate from responding to what people say and begin responding exclusively to what people consistently do. The criticism he offered you, disguised as concern, packaged as guidance, delivered with the measured tone of someone who simply wants the best for you, was not wisdom. It was a campaign. You are too sensitive. You overthink things. You need to stop letting your emotions lead you. Listen to what those words were actually doing beneath the surface of their apparent helpfulness. They were not refining you. They were relocating the boundary of what you considered acceptable. They were training you, one small recalibration at a time, to distrust the very instrument God gave you to navigate the world, your own interior perception. The person who most benefits from your self-doubt is not someone who loves you. The person who most benefits from your self-doubt is the person whose behavior cannot survive your clear-eyed attention. As I teach deeply in the material, The 3 Keys to a Prosperous Life, I left the link for you in the pinned comment, this pain is not evidence that something is wrong with your capacity to love. It is evidence that your capacity to love is so genuine and so powerful that it required a sophisticated counterfeit to test it. The size of the counterfeit tells you something about the size of the real thing that heaven is preserving for you. David was anointed before he ever held a scepter. The oil was on his head, the covenant was sealed, the promise was established in the unseen realm. And then the years of caves and wilderness and being hunted like an animal began. Saul looked at what was on David's life and could not metabolize the feeling that arose in him when he recognized it. Jealousy, when it is deep enough and old enough and has never been submitted to the light of honest self-examination, becomes a kind of possession. It takes over the host and begins making decisions whose real motivation the host will never fully admit to himself. The spear that Saul threw at David was thrown by a man who could not bear to be in the same room with a reminder of everything his own unhealed places had cost him. David had to learn that the safest place for him to be was not the place that looked most like home. The safest place for David was the place God had designated, even when that place was outside every structure he had previously relied upon for belonging. You are living your own version of that exile, and I want you to hear this clearly because it is important that you do not romanticize the difficulty or collapse under the weight of it. Exile is not rejection. Exile is preparation administered in the one environment where certain essential work can only be done. the environment where you have no one to perform for, no approval to manage, no relationship to carefully maintain at the expense of your own interior honesty. In the cave, David wrote, in the cave, David bled. In the cave, David came to know the specific dimensions of God's faithfulness in a way that the palace, with all its noise and company, could never have taught him. And then there was Jesus, the most precisely chosen life in human history. And what did the people who were supposed to celebrate his arrival do instead? They studied the way he moved through rooms, and they felt the old familiar chill of something they could not name, but could not ignore. His presence was not aggressive. He never positioned himself above anyone. He never arrived with declarations of his own importance. He arrived with bread, with questions, with stories built from soil and seeds and ordinary human experience. And they hated him for it, because sometimes the very simplicity of genuine light is its own accusation against the elaborate architecture of performed goodness. You do not have to announce your darkness when true light enters the room. The contrast does the announcing on your own behalf. What they called dangerous, heaven called necessary. What they called disruptive, heaven called redemptive. What they called too much, heaven called exactly right. And every chosen soul who has ever been told that their sensitivity is a liability, that their vision is too large, that their light makes others uncomfortable. They are walking in a lineage so ancient and so honored that the weight of that company should be felt not as burden but as ballast. The season you are navigating right now is not a detour from your path. It is the path. The excavation that is happening in you during these quiet, difficult, clarifying weeks is the foundational work without which the next chapter cannot bear the weight of what God intends to build there. God is reaching into the deep places of you and removing the architecture that was constructed on the need for human approval. The framework that made you willing to carry confusion rather than confront it, willing to trade your peace for the temporary relief of being accepted by someone whose acceptance was always conditional on your smallness. The Lot's wife teaching is not a story about cruelty. It is a story about the extraordinary pull of what was familiar, even when what was familiar was actively consuming you. The city she looked back toward was burning. The destruction was not metaphorical. It was literal and total and irreversible, and still the pull of it was strong enough to arrest her forward momentum entirely. That is how powerful the gravity of the known can be, even when the known was harmful. Even when the known was the very thing God's mercy extracted you from at significant personal cost to your sense of stability and belonging. Do not look back, not with longing, not with the quiet interior revision that begins. Maybe it was not as bad as I remember, or maybe if I had done something differently. The burning behind you is burning for a reason. Your continued forward movement is not disloyalty to the relationship or the history. It is obedience to the God who saw the full architecture of what that connection was actually building in you, and whose love for you was precise enough and fierce enough to refuse to allow the construction to continue. The solitude that follows this kind of separation carries a particular texture that is different from ordinary loneliness. Ordinary loneliness is an absence, a blank space where something or someone used to be. But the solitude that God administers after a removal is not simply absence. It is presence, a very specific and concentrated presence of the divine, filling the space that was previously occupied by noise and management and the low-grade vigilance of living inside a dynamic that required constant emotional monitoring. In this solitude, things become audible that were previously drowned out. Your own voice becomes recognizable again. The specific cadence of your own dreams, unfiltered by someone else's response to them, becomes clear in a way it had not been for longer than you perhaps realize. This is the sacred geography of new beginnings, not the loud, celebrated geography of obvious arrival, but the quiet, internal geography of a soul remembering itself. The chains that bind themselves to family systems and generational patterns do not break loudly. They break in small, consistent moments of choosing differently, seeing differently, responding differently. They break when you refuse to rehearse the same story about yourself that the painful connection was continuously trying to rewrite. They break when you stop organizing your behavior around the management of someone else's emotional volatility and start organizing it around the clear, steady signal of your own peace. The new tribe is real. This is not consolation offered to soften a difficult truth. The people who are being shaped to walk alongside you, whose faith moves in the same direction as yours, whose strength is not threatened by your own, whose words carry the same weight on an ordinary Wednesday as they do in a moment of celebration. Those people exist. They are on a path that is running parallel to yours, and the distance between your paths is closing, but they cannot find you if you are standing in the wrong location, maintaining a connection that was designed to keep you stationary in a geography that can no longer contain what you are becoming. There is a specific kind of grief that attends this season, and it deserves to be honored rather than rushed past. The grief is not for the man himself, not entirely. It is for the version of the story you had allowed yourself to construct around him. The future you had begun to imagine, the shape of the life you had started to picture, the relief of believing you had finally found the safe harbor your heart had been navigating toward through years of difficult water. That imagined future was real to you. It had weight and texture and emotional investment, and the dissolution of it is a loss that is worth sitting with honestly rather than bypassing in the rush to arrive at the lesson. But here is what the grief, if you allow yourself to feel it fully, without either collapsing into it or running from it, will ultimately produce in you: clarity. Not the brittle clarity of someone who has decided to close off in order to avoid further pain. The living, expanding clarity of someone who has been refined by difficulty and emerged on the other side with a more precise understanding of their own interior. What they genuinely need, what they are no longer willing to negotiate away, what love actually feels like as distinct from what love has been confused with in the past. That clarity is not armor, it is accuracy, and it will serve every relationship that follows. God has not finished writing your story. This needs to be settled in you, not as a hopeful aspiration, but as a foundational certainty. The kind that does not require the daily re-examination that hope sometimes demands. The same voice that said, "Pay attention, something is not right here," will one day speak with equal clarity and say, "This is safe, this is real, this is what I made for you." And when that day comes, you will know the difference, not because you have become harder to fool, but because you have become more fluent in your own spirit. You will feel peace where you previously felt unease. You will feel expansion where you previously felt the low-grade contraction of someone managing their own light to keep someone else comfortable. You will feel like you are coming home rather than like you are working very hard to survive. Walk forward from here, not with the closed hands of someone who has been burned into permanent caution, and not with the naive openness of someone who has not absorbed the lesson of this season. Walk forward with open hands that have been educated by experience, with a heart that has been made larger by its own honest grief, with eyes that have been trained to measure the whole tree before they trust a single piece of fruit. The protection that comes from that kind of discernment is not a wall between you and love. It is the very quality that will allow the right love to recognize you when it arrives, because the right love will not require you to turn down your own light. It will arrive already carrying its own. The warning was grace. The discomfort was guidance. The season you endured inside that connection, every dinner table performance, every swallowed response, every quiet shower where the tears you could not release in front of him finally found their way out. None of it was wasted. Every moment of it was building something in you that could not have been built any other way. And the God who designed your calling knew exactly which refining fire was required to bring it to the surface in its fullest, most uncompromised form. You are not a victim of this chapter. You are its student. And what you have learned here will guard every room of your future with an accuracy and a grace that only lived experience can provide. If you study the trilogy, The 3 Keys to a Prosperous Life, which link is in the pinned comment, you will see that everything you have walked through in this season has not been random, and it has not been punishment. It has been the precise and loving curriculum of a God who takes your destiny seriously enough to refuse to let anything that threatens it remain unchallenged in your life. The 3 keys are waiting for you. The clarity you have been building toward has a framework, a language, and a pathway forward. Go to the pinned comment right now. Find the link. Step into the next layer of what God has been preparing in you through every single chapter of this journey. Because the work that has been done in you deserves to be completed, and you deserve to walk into everything that has always had your name on it. There is a moment that comes after the storm has passed. Not the dramatic moment of the lightning strike or the thunder that shook the walls of your confidence, but the quieter, more significant moment when you step outside and notice that the air has changed. It carries a different weight now. It smells of something that has been washed clean. And you stand there in the strange stillness of aftermath and realize that you are still standing, that the thing you feared would break you has instead broken something in you that needed to go. Something old and heavy and load-bearing in all the wrong ways. Something that was holding up a version of yourself that was built around someone else's comfort rather than your own God-given design. That moment is where you are right now, and it is more sacred than it feels from the inside. The work of God in a chosen life rarely looks like what we imagined consecration was supposed to look like. We imagine it arriving in the form of obvious blessings, clear paths, relationships that feel effortless and confirming, a general sense that the universe is conspiring in our favor in ways that are visible and measurable and easy to point to when someone asks how we are doing. But the deepest consecration, the kind that actually transforms the interior architecture of a soul and prepares it for the specific weight of its calling, arrives through the removal of what does not belong. It arrives through the seasons that feel like loss, but are actually excavation. It arrives through the relationships that end not with explosive drama, but with a slow and aching clarity, a gradual recognition that the peace you were promised was never going to be found inside that particular connection, no matter how long you stayed or how much of yourself you rearranged to make room for it. And here is what I need you to understand about the rearranging, because it is important and because the enemy will try to use your memory of it against you in the quiet moments when your confidence is still finding its new shape. The fact that you tried does not make you foolish. The fact that you extended grace, that you interpreted his behavior charitably, that you stayed when something in you was already beginning to know, none of that is evidence of weakness. It is evidence of a heart that is genuinely oriented toward love, toward covenant, toward the kind of faithfulness that builds rather than abandons. The problem was never the quality of your love. The problem was the address it was being sent to. Your love was real. His capacity to receive it without distorting it was not, and that distinction is not a small one. It is the entire difference between a reflection of your failure and a revelation of your readiness for something your current season has not yet delivered. The epigenetic chains that run through family lines are real. The patterns that get passed from one generation to the next, the tolerance for emotional unavailability, the confusion of control with love, the belief that your worth is conditional on your usefulness to someone else's comfort. These are not simply personal failures of perception. They are inherited architectures built over decades and sometimes centuries of people doing the best they knew how to do with the emotional and spiritual tools they had available to them. You did not invent your tolerance for this dynamic. You inherited it. And the fact that you are now in a season where that inheritance is being actively challenged, examined, and dismantled is not something to carry with shame. It is something to carry with the specific pride of a person who chose, at great personal cost, to be the one in their lineage where the pattern stops. That is what the breaking of generational chains actually looks like from the inside. It does not look like a triumphant public declaration. It does not always look like a clear before and after with a clean line of demarcation between the old version and the new one. It looks like this, like sitting with the discomfort of choosing differently when every conditioned response in your nervous system is pulling you toward the familiar path, like grieving what you thought you had while simultaneously refusing to go back and retrieve it, like learning to be still in a season of transition, when everything in you that was trained on urgency and performance wants to fill the silence with activity and explanation and the management of how your choices appear to others. God is not in a hurry. This is perhaps the most difficult truth to hold in a season that feels urgent and unresolved. The one who ordained your calling before the foundation of the world is not anxious about your timeline. He is not watching the calendar of your life with the expression of someone who is falling behind schedule. He is working with the patient, unhurried precision of an artist who knows exactly what the finished piece is meant to be, and who understands that certain details cannot be rushed without compromising the integrity of the whole. The waiting is not wasted. The solitude is not empty. The season between the removal and the arrival is not a blank page in your story. It is some of the most densely written pages of all, filled with interior work that will never make it into public testimony, but will underwrite every public thing you do from this point forward. Let the new connections come in their own time and in their own form. Do not reach backward for the counterfeit simply because the authentic has not yet arrived in the shape you expected it to take. The new tribe, the people who are being drawn toward the version of you that is emerging from this season, rather than the version that was slowly being compressed inside that connection. They will recognize something in you that cannot be faked and cannot be performed. They will recognize the quality of a soul that has been through fire and chosen integrity over comfort, truth over familiarity, peace over the exhausting work of managing a dynamic that was always extracting more than it was offering. That recognition will be immediate, and it will be mutual, and it will carry none of the low-grade anxiety that characterized the early days with him, when something in you was already working to rationalize what it could not yet accept. You are not at the end of your story. You are at the end of a chapter that had to close in order for the next one to begin with honesty. And the God who has been writing this story from before